Star Wars in honor of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, coming out here shortly at the end of the week. If you're listening to this the week that it goes up, we here at Paprika are talking about all the phases of the eras, if you will, of the Star Wars movies. This is chronologically what kicks things off with the prequel trilogy, episodes 1, 2, and 3. And I have a team of people, some could say the Star Wars experts.
Top men.
Top men. This is that
men.
wrong Lucas production there. Here to discuss the prequel trilogy. Let's go around the table real quick. We have Sherman. How you doing today, sir?
Doing okay, yeah.
Yeah, you ready to talk some prequels?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. Josh, we have you right across the table, sir. How you doing?
Hello, viewers.
They are not viewers for the umpteenth time. They are listeners, sir. One of these days, I ask you, just one of these days, to get that right.
I can see sound.
And right next to me, we have the champ himself, the Test Your Might champion, Chris Baker. How you doing, sir?
Doing all right. How you doing?
Excellent. So here's what we're gonna do real quick, Josh. We record this in the interest of full disclosure, transparency here at Paprika. We recorded the Disney era Star Wars joints the other week, so we already have a little bit of your intro. But let's talk to these other two guys first. Okay. Sherman, let's talk to you real quick. Do you remember how you came to the Star Wars universe and who brought you into it?
Yes, I was in elementary school and a classmate of mine was doing drawings of X-Wing fighters. And I said, "What's that from?" And he said, "It's from Star Wars." And I'd heard something about it. I don't entirely remember everything that I heard about it, but I knew I wanted R2-D2 and C-3PO. Mm-hmm. And I eventually got them, and my younger brother took them and destroyed them for me.
As younger siblings do.
Yes. But yeah, I've been a fan of Star Wars ever since I knew it was a thing. So.
Oh, very nice. Now, Sherman, I knew I had a pin in here somewhere.
Okay,
There it goes, digging into my hip. Your gun is digging into my hip. What would you say, sir, are your top 3 favorite Star Wars movies?
Top 3. The Empire Strikes Back, because that was the actual first movie that I saw, the first Star Wars movie that I saw. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. Then it would be A New Hope and Revenge of the Sith.
Okay. All right, then. All right. Interesting son out there, actually. I like that. And over to you, Champ Baker. Do you remember how you got into Star Wars, man? Who drew you in?
Yeah. Return of the Jedi was actually one of the very first movies I ever saw.
Nice.
I think I was 3 or 4 years old. My parents took me in the theater to see it when it was still out. And so that was the very first one I saw. And so I kind of watched them backwards, like VHS tapes at like maybe a friend's house. Like I remember seeing Empire Strikes Back, and everyone's talking about Luke Skywalker, and I see the walkers on Hoth, and I think, oh, that chicken walker must be Luke Skywalker because they're in the clouds, right? And then eventually, I'd see the movies on USA marathons as kids, and so we watched them backwards. So in A New Hope, when Obi-Wan's alive, I'm telling my younger brother, like, hey, that's the ghost guy from the other ones, he's still alive in this one. Yeah, so that was sort of, I did them backwards.
All right, nice. Yeah. And what would you say, what's rounding out your top 3 of Star Wars movies?
So because of that, Jedi is my favorite. And, associating with seeing my parents and my dad, like the father-son themes and that strike me hard. So Jedi, top 1, and then I'd probably go Empire and Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, all right then. Now, you are, Baker, a self-proclaimed prequel apologist.
Defender. You said that wrong.
Okay. All right. Defender.
Apologist, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you stand for these movies.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked you to come onto these. Yeah. Man, I want to see what you're talking about here in the
into the lion's den.
Into the lion's den.
I'm with you, man.
The Rancor den.
There it is.
Great pit of Carcoon.
All right, so let's kick this.
What a bunch of nerf herders in here.
Jesus Christ. Let's kick this thing off, man. It is the late 90s, man. Word gets out that George Lucas is making 3 more Star Wars films. Let's go around the table. What were your first thoughts? We're returning to the world of Star Wars. We had 3 damn near perfect movies, and now we might get 3 more perfect movies. How excited were you? What were your first thoughts? Do you remember back to the late 90s?
Yes, I do. I remember. I was alive back then. I remember watching the special editions of the original trilogy movies,
97,
and realizing that they had been a test bed for what he was probably going to do with the prequel trilogies. I was excited because it was new Star Wars. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't go to the point of going to see Meet Joe Black.
Wing Commander.
Just to see a preview of it or a trailer for it. But I was pretty excited for it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Josh?
I lost my shit. I had grown up in that era of Star Wars nothingness, just the desert of no Star Wars media. There was the magazine Star Wars Insider, which only came out 4 times a year. There was a small amount of action figures. I would go to antique stores just to find the old action figures because that's the only stuff that was around.
Yeah.
And a few comics and a few books, and I would just devour that stuff. And when he announced the prequels, yeah, I lost my shit. I went to every movie that had a trailer, and I would just watch the trailer and leave. I bought a little TV and put it in my room because every morning on Good Morning America, they would give little like bits of information about the new movies, and so I was just devoted to that. Like every morning, I'd wake up at like 6 a.m. and sit there and watch a 10-minute segment on what was coming out for episode 1, and I would record it on tape and I'd play it back and watch it over and over again.
All right. You were all in.
I was a madman.
Heavy mark. And what about you, Chris? They announced, 3 new from Lucas. Were you on board?
Yeah, oh, totally. So, Star Wars is the entire reason I got on the internet as a teenager. Like, the internet was kind of cool, but then it was like, wait, special editions are coming out and prequels? And it was like, that's what led me to movie websites and message boards and, sharing ideas like that. And so I was all totally down for it. And so whenever I learned that the trailer would be playing in front of and after The Water Boy, I looked up times before I had to go to school. I was in 11th grade, and then as soon as the bell rang, I sprinted to my car. It was like one of the first people out of the parking lot, sped down to Ballantine Theater, bought my ticket, ran in, could hear the Star Wars music playing, and got to see Yoda say his big speech about anger leads to fear leads to anger, and then it ended, and I was like, fuck, now I got to sit through The Water Boy to see it again. So I sat there, the only person in the theater at like a 2:15 screening, and then saw the trailer.
Hey, it's just suffering.
Yeah, he was just suffering all throughout.
Suffering leads to Water Boy.
Water Boy ain't too bad, man. It's one of the
Water sucks. Not the Water Boy.
one of the lesser
Sith
Adam
hate
Sandler Niners.
water.
Yeah. So the theater on the opening night, man. What was that shit like for you guys? More notably, what was it like as people were exiting said theater? Do you remember what the mood was like? Or people like, that was a Star Wars movie?
There was some anger. I was kind of stunned, like, did I just see what I saw? Because the version of it that I saw, there was more Jar Jar in the Phantom Menace. And I went back with some friends a few weeks later, like that weekend, because I went to see the Wednesday night showing of it. Went back that following weekend with some friends of mine, and they'd cut some of it out. So there were actually 2 in the earliest versions of it. There was more Jar Jar in it, and they took it out. And they responded to it that quickly. I guess they had multiple cuts of it.
Emergency edits on the worst Star Wars.
Dipping out of the theater, Josh, what was that like for you? Were you just awash in the glow of Star Wars?
Oh yeah. Well, I went in there. I went in there with no real expectations. I was not disappointed at all. I loved it. I thought it was a great movie. It felt like Star Wars, and it was very. I enjoyed it. It wasn't quite what I was expecting, but what was I supposed to be expecting?
Yeah.
And so I walked out of and I actually had another showing right after I walked out of my first one. So I walked out of that and walked one movie theater down and went right back in to watch it again. There were a lot of people who were like, huh. Like, they walked out with just that kind of look in their eye. Like, so that was, that was a thing that I watched.
Yeah.
So this is pod racing? And
Wizard!
That was Wizard, Andy. But I walked out just super pumped. And so were all the guys I was with. And I was dressed up like a Jedi. And I was, I had left school that day sick in the middle of the day. And my teacher's like, you just got sick randomly? I'm like, no, I'm going to go see Star Wars.
We appreciate your honesty here.
Metachlorianitis.
I was metachlorianitis. Got a bad case of the Medi right here in the chlorine. So I was very happy. Now, looking back on it, as time went on and I watched it more and more, I started to see what people were seeing, and I was like, okay. But being a diehard Star Wars fan, I would never give up. But people were like, so Josh, did you not like it? I was like, fuck you.
So you had the blinders on. You had the Star
Oh, yeah.
Wars blinders
Oh, yeah.
on. All right, Baker. What about you? Walking out for the first
Yeah,
time.
so saw that with my dad and brother. There were people dressed up in the theater, and I feel like the people coming out, it was like people were still fine and happy. I didn't hear anyone who was like angry, but also wasn't standing around talking to them. But I remember my own feeling watching it, like super excited. I'm a big John Williams fan, so I'm listening to the music, and when the droids are invading, I'm like, okay, this sounds kind of like the Nazi March from Last Crusades, a little bit like that. And then just the talking with the Nemoidians, I was starting to get that feeling like, okay, all right, this isn't quite what I was expecting, But still, by the end, I still really enjoyed the movie. And up until that point, I'd seen Jurassic Park. That was the theater movie I saw the most in theaters. It was
Me
like
too.
3. And then Phantom Menace was like 5. I went to go see it 5 times and, keep trying to, not necessarily figure it out because I was enjoying it. But that summer I went to like a film school for high school kids. And like I remember just arguments with all these like other pretentious film school nerds, 15, 16 years old. There's the whole summer about everything. I'm sure we're going to cover, those topics too. But.
All right.
I don't personally understand why people didn't like it. I mean, what's not to like about trade disputes and embargoes?
Exactly. So possibly,
Is that legal?
although
in there with 2 Jedi.
we will make it legal is a pretty dope ass line. We will. Oh shit, you can do that. Well, and now we see it happening in real life these days. Possibly the most critically panned thing to come out of this particular movie is Jar Jar Binks. Let's talk about Jar Jar Binks.
Okie day.
Is there any
Reason for him?
yes, the reason is he's the comedic relief. I get
Yeah.
that. Although that should have gone to 3PO and R2, who have been the comedic relief in other movies.
He was also the final vote on Order 66. Like the final
do it.
vote
Let's
on
do it.
share that Palpatine took over the universe.
Are there any redeemable qualities to Jar Jar?
For me, I remember there was a lot of discussion about the racial overtones of Jar Jar Binks. He was,
And the Nemoidians.
like he was like they were these like he was an intergalactic step and fetch it was one description I heard of it. But you have in retrospect, he was an alien who didn't have all of the organs of articulation in his mouth like humans do, so he couldn't normally speak like humans would anyway. So you have to make sure not to project your culture, your viewpoint directly onto an alien because they are outsiders. And he's coming to this from a civilization that didn't know basic and then learned only just enough to get by.
Right.
So that he was basically speaking a pidgin because he spoke Gungan. So it was you could project that it was some kind of racial overtone onto it, but also maybe not because unlike Star Trek, Star Wars is not as allegorical
Correct.
as Star Trek. So it's not quite you would be making some mistake projecting any kind of racializing onto Jar Jar.
All right.
Yeah.
I can get down with that. What about you two? Do you think there's anything redeemable?
I don't know about redeemable. Honestly, he just did not have that much impact on me. When I saw him, I was like, all right. I don't know who this asshead is, but okay. But like,
He's there hogging up a frame.
I feel like he had a negative impact on the Gungans. Like the actual Gungans are a really unique idea, a very unique species, and in a lot of the extended universe, especially the Clone Wars graphic novels, the Gungans are badasses.
Yeah, they're getting it done. Huh?
Yeah, they get shit done. But he kind of made them all look bad, and even in the context of the film itself, the Gungans were aware of that. Like when he came back to
the city
to see Boss Nass, he was like, they weren't like, "Oh, hey, you're back." They're like,
I'm gonna kick this motherfucker out. Yeah.
How we moved the city down the ocean.
they're like, first they banish him, and then he's like, if I go back, like, he made it sound like he was gonna get a spanking or something, but Boss Nass is like, no, I'm gonna murder you.
Punish. How about you, Chris? Is there anything worthwhile to the character of Jar Jar Binks?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's an innocent in this movie, and it's sort of reflective of like Anakin's also an innocent in this, and you have two innocent characters who are taken from their home and thrust into something bigger. And of course, Anakin goes to the dark side. And, Jar Jar is there for comic relief, but, I think he's also there for the kids. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Kids who grew up with the prequels do like Jar Jar.
Yeah.
And I've got a 39-year-old woman who loves Jar Jar as well. She thinks he's like a big puppy dog frog. Like she just likes the design. And, he's friendly and innocent and means well. Now, there's a lot of goofiness to him too that sort of gets in the way that Star Wars never really had, and so I think that's what's jarring for a lot of people.
That was good. I like that.
15 minutes in,
So,
there it is.
But what else was I going to go with that?
So proud of your own
It's fine.
goddamn
You
pun.
took me out of it.
It all kind of goes back to the Ewok argument, in Return of the Jedi. Episode 1 and Return of the Jedi feel very similar to me because they were a little bit less serious. They were a bit more bubblegum, popcorn, unicorn. Yeah, that's right. Lots of corn. There was a lot of corn. It was a lot. It was like kind of like dessert. It was the sweet side of Star Wars, and so yeah, it was kind of childish. The Ewoks were childish. So is Jar Jar, but that's okay. It's okay to have that.
fair
And
enough.
it also reflects Lucas's. I mean, he's a huge cinephile, and like Jar Jar is very patterned on the silent film stars and that sort of slapstick body comedy,
Chaplin
physical
shit.
comedy. Yeah. Which, as a cinephile, anytime people integrate their love of old films, I'm like totally on board. And whether the regular public sees that or is like still cool with it, like him jumping around and the blaster's caught on his foot and he's able to take out droids. Like, if you can get down with that, great. If not, I get it. But I'm fine with it.
Well, not to mention the fact that biologically, Gungans aren't supposed to actually have bones. They're just cartilaginous on the inside. So
Why do you know these things?
So there's a lot of focus that's shined on what's fucked up about this movie, especially Jar Jar, the whole trade disputes, and that doesn't make for a very exciting movie. What does this film get right?
It feels like Star Wars. I mean, you have the pod race.
It's fucking amazing.
It's awesome. It's
Oh, yeah.
so full of energy.
Great
and
sound design
exciting.
there.
The choreographed fight scenes are incredible. That might be one of the best lightsaber fights ever.
Yes.
It was incredible. It was colorful. It had action. It wasn't quite the action we were looking for. It dived deeper into Jedi lore and the Jedi culture, which we had never had before. It gave us a lot.
All right.
So,
Chris.
Yeah, no, I agree with all those points. And, I've seen some people looking back say that they feel The Phantom Menace does feel the most like Star Wars out of the 3 prequels. I think, all those points are correct. And the pod race is like one of the all-time, I think, greatest things of the prequels. And maybe in all the Star Wars movies, that entire sequence is just so fun. And it goes to Lucas's love of racing and
Back to those American Graffiti days.
Yeah, American Graffiti. It's like the Chariot Race and Ben-Hur.
I never even thought about that,
Yeah. And he even uses some of his same shots from the car chase at the end of THX. There's certain angles on the Anakin as a driver that he reused, So I dig it, I get it. There's a lot of talking, but even now, like the political aspect as an adult, and I'm more engaged in politics, I'm watching it, and I'm like, yeah, I see this shit happening in real life. I get it. I get what Lucas is doing, and for adults who are coming back to that, I guess they were like, I don't want to deal with the real world implications in Star Wars now, but no, I'm fine with it. I like it.
All right, Sherman, what does this get right?
I think showing the advanced technology of the Gungans, because they had technology that could literally take out the droids, and they had a way of encasing plasma in
little
these
balls, Dragon Balls.
Yeah, well, yeah. They had a way of encasing plasma that they'd harvested from the core of Naboo and using it as an offensive weapon against. I mean, they use it in their own wars, but they used it against the droids to even greater effect. And they had domesticated all of many of the animals around them for their war. I mean, I was really impressed by the Famba bees.
Yeah.
The big four. Well, they were amphibians, but anyway, when they landed the Trade Federation droid carrier ships in the forest and the animals scattered, and they had all kinds of different little animals and stuff like that, and you would find that in the understory of a forest. And they were in the swamp, and there were hints of an even bigger story behind who had brought the Gungans to Naboo and what the civilization they were basically living on the skeleton of, the remains of, because when they went to their sacred place, there were these giants' heads. Almost like Olmec heads in South and Central America that pointed to something that...
Yeah, they're not Gungan.
Well, yeah, these definitely aren't Gungans, so there may be even something even bigger behind what these Gungans are basically living on the remnants of.
You're all about that
civilization.
culture and world building. Huh?
Yeah.
It kind of fleshes out the story for you.
The
I
flora
add
and
on to
fauna in
that?
Star Wars
Yeah.
is really amazing.
Yeah.
I think one of the things it gets right, I wanted to say, is the overall design of the prequels and how it exists before the dark times. And going along with Sherman's point, like, they did have that world building. They had a thought out ecosystem. They also had new designs like the plasma weapons. We haven't seen that in Star Wars before, the plasma balls. But like the overall, like, we're gonna make this feel or look like a different era. So we go with this Art Deco design, and now instead of the blocky junkiness of the jagged angles of the Empire, we've now got these curved ships and these, domed buildings
That
in
was
Naboo.
really
And like I
cool.
thought,
Yeah.
it's like you're showing us something new. And a lot of people
Yeah.
didn't respond well to that, but like looking back, I love that. Like, this does feel like a different era of the same galaxy, but just a different era. And going to an Art Deco style, I think really was a great choice for that.
I think the reason a lot of people didn't really respond to it is the common argument that I first thought and that I've commonly heard since is, how did we get from this to this in about 17-year time frame? It's completely different. It looks everything's brand new and shiny. It's just
You got to think about what the Clone Wars did to the galaxy.
That's true.
It was potentially one of the bloodiest wars in Star Wars history, and we're talking about a history that goes back hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of years, and we get jumped into a war that surpasses, as far as casualties and damage, most of those previous wars, with the exception of maybe the Mandalorian War and the original Sith War.
Yes.
So, yeah, of course it's going to have a very sudden and very detrimental impact on technology, on people. If you even think about what happened to Russia after World War II, after Germany just completely destroyed Russia. They
And
were in
London.
the Dark Ages for a long time after that. And when we come into A New Hope, yeah, they're in the Dark Ages because that war obliterated everything. It made it so easy for the Empire to take over because the Empire's like, look at how bad this was. You got to let us run things for a while.
right.
So
Yeah.
I find it believable that it could go that direction so quickly.
Okay, last question for you. Let's talk about the Jedi Council.
No, those fucking guys.
In this first movie particular, should they have let Obi-Wan take on Anakin at the end as a Padawan?
Now, do you mean based on their rules or based on hindsight of what ends up happening?
Based on this movie, what we know is Obi-Wan just got his promotion, and they're already giving him a Padawan. Do you think that was a wise move on their part?
Well, they would normally be wise, but as we learned in the movies that came afterwards, the Jedi were being blinded. They weren't being able to use their full foresight in the Force like they had before. So it was, I guess, to some extent, almost like a sentimental move on their part in memory of the great Qui-Gon Jinn. So they didn't want to cause too much of a kerfuffle because he had died and he had sacrificed himself in order to stop the Trade Federation from basically taking over the entire planet.
Yes, Anakin's like a consolation prize,
Yeah.
basically, for Obi-Wan.
Here, Obi-Wan. Yeah, your master's dead. But
feel
what
like
about this kid he found?
I feel like they just didn't know what to do with them. It'd be like if your two roommates come home with like a giant dog puppy, and then your roommates die. Now you've got the puppy. And you're like, okay, what do I do with this puppy?
It could tear up the house, but maybe he'll be cool.
Let's give it to Ewan McGregor.
But he was strong in the Force, though, too.
Yeah.
So he did have talent in the Force, but
They were so on the fence about him, and when Qui-Gon died, they were kind of like, well, we've got him now.
yes.
So
Yeah, and this sort of speaks to the the staidness of the Jedi Council, like their adherence to strict rules and stuff. Like that's part of their downfall. I think that's part of their downfall more than like let's let Anakin in. But they're like, oh, we got these rules. He's too old. We can't really train him
He's too old,
because he
too
could
old
have
to
too
get
much
training.
emotion and that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. But also, if you allowed more emotion into it, then maybe it would be okay to train.
Also, hubris.
a good question to ask to follow up on that would be, if not Obi-Wan, who on the council would have been a good fit for training him?
Oh, longhead ass dude, man.
Oh, from Close
Ki-Adi
Encounters?
Mundi?
What do you say?
Ki-Adi Mundi?
Yes.
I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think Ki-Adi Mundi would have been a great pick for him. However, Ki-Adi Mundi lacked compassion in a lot of ways. That could have hurt
Boy,
Anakin
that sounds like
a
the
little
perfect
bit.
Jedi.
Well, yeah. Well,
I
he was known for just throwing his clone troopers into slaughter because he's like, oh, they're just clones. So his mindset could have helped Anakin because it would have kept his emotions in check, but he also could have pushed him further to the dark side because he had
Quicker.
no ability to
Yeah.
show empathy.
So, episode 1 comes out, drops. People have feelings. And then 3 years later, we get 2002's episode 2, Attack of the Clones. This is where George Lucas really starts pushing for digital sets in the film. And boy, does that show.
Yeah.
And you really see it when there's an actual practical physical set there. And you're like, well, that doesn't look like that. And for me, that's part of the downfall of this movie is the jarring, stark difference between, say, the diner that Obi-Wan has to go to and, the ship that Anakin and Padme are on, which is an actual physical set, just looks completely
like
different.
Although Petronaki Arena itself was actually a physical model.
That I believe, that kind of makes sense. But there's a couple of just
Like
in
the,
Padme's
the
quarters.
processing line in Geonosis.
Oh,
when
yeah,
they're,
that was-
when they're
yeah.
on the processing line. So
very
clear.
very
what we're
clear
looking at
digital.
there.
And they put a lot of old Hollywood. Do you know a little bit of old Hollywood glow?
Yeah.
On some of that, I understand Lucas's affinity for that, but leave that with Indiana
Especially
Jones.
like in the Jedi Temple when they're talking to Yoda.
Yes.
And you just have that glowing light coming down from like a skylight above.
Yeah.
Or when Obi-Wan's talking to that bitch at the library, he's like, "What is this planet?" She's like, "If it's not there, it doesn't exist."
Speaking of Jedi hubris,
Thanks, hubris. So what? To me, this is the worst of the Star Wars films. I'll watch a good long movie. Love long movies. I'll even watch a bad movie from time to time, but don't give me a long bad movie. And this is 2 hours and like 30 some odd minutes of bad film. What do you guys think about this movie overall? Where would you rank Attack of the Clones?
It's pretty low. It is, and I hate saying that because I love everything clones and Mandalorian, and there's a lot of just if clones are on the screen, hell yeah. So I love it for that. But man, was it long, and man, was it bad. I mean, the dialogue, your skin is so smooth. Not like the desert, the sand, so coarse, it gets everywhere. Like,
what do you think about it, sir?
come on.
I see it as a Star Wars noir movie.
Okay.
There was a lot of moody lighting to it,
Yeah.
especially on Camino with the storms and everything. It was like an approaching storm that was coming to sweep across the galaxy.
Yeah.
And there was this murder mystery of what happened to Sifo Dyas and who commissioned this clone army and who are these Kaminoans that have been removed from the Jedi archives.
Yeah.
It'd be great if any of that had actual real answers in the movie.
That was the worst mystery movie ever. At the end, you're just like, oh, okay.
And then the greatest mystery of all, why did I watch this? Chris, where does this rank in your?
What'd you think of it?
So I rewatched it today. I wanted to watch these again before I got here, and I never had time. I sort of waffle between putting this and The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, sort of rotated in my bottom three. And I have a hard time saying, oh, this is the worst one, or any movie is the worst one, because I'm like, these are still good movies to me. It's just like the lowest rank.
Still Star Wars.
You know?
Yes.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it's not, I don't feel it's terrible.
It's pre-Disney era
think-
Star Wars.
Yeah. I think this has some of the best set pieces. I think it starts with a bang and has much better pacing than the Phantom Menace did, because it starts with talking and kind of talks to
Right.
I think to Sherman's point, it's Obi-Wan's detective story, but it can also be simultaneously like the cartooniest of the prequels with the like Tom and Jerry sort of factory sequence, which I think was added late. Lucas wanted to add to that.
God damn it, George.
But also the what was I going with? It was the cartooniest and also the. You're gonna have to cut this part out, as I think.
We're keeping it all.
We're all staring directly
It
at
requires
you.
me to do work.
God, where was I going with it? Shit.
Sometimes you lose it.
A good point.
Well, already whatever that point was better than
yeah,
Attack of the Clones.
The romance between Anakin and Padme.
Let's
also,
talk about that.
Yeah,
It
that
felt
was
so forced. There is no actual. I didn't believe it.
No, there's absolutely no reason to believe it at all. He is a creeper of the highest order in this
But
film.
he'd been raised around. He'd first come up from being a slave, then goes into a monastic order. He didn't know how to deal with girls.
But
And he's a young Jedi, hearing that he's never supposed to experience love.
Yeah.
And that everyone else in the world can experience love if they want, but you can't.
To your
You're
point,
not
though,
allowed to.
I mean, there's about a 10-year gap between Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he might not know how to deal with girls, but in that 10-year gap, he's learned how to deal with humans. And he is not dealing with this one in particular very well.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's a babe. I can't.
Well,
talk to
I
girls.
mean,
I
he
know,
had
he's
seen
from
her
a
at a very
babe of the
young
highest
age.
order.
He had seen her right at the beginning of the stirrings of adolescence. So
That's true.
she would have made a very strong impression on him.
Yes.
And he didn't know how to deal with that. So
That's a good point. And yeah, the Jedi didn't.
no, they
shies
didn't
away
teach
from
him
this
how to
thing.
do that, deal with that anyway, too. So yeah.
At all. But still, to your point, that relationship is quite unbelievable to me. Just where I roll my eyes is her love confession as they're being wheeled out to die. It comes from absolutely. From 20 minutes ago, she's like,
I don't know.
nah, player, it ain't happening.
Stop touching my shoulder.
With my dope ass black dress on.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah,
like, it
dominatrix
ain't.
outfit.
I fucking
Yeah.
love that dress.
Yeah, it's-
And then she's like, yeah, but I do love you. And really, now you confess this and we're about to be wheeled out to be
Yeah.
slaughtered? I have that part. I'm like, where'd this love come
Any
from?
port in the storm.
Yeah, any port in the storm. She's like, hey, I gotta love somebody before I die. Hey, might as well be you.
Well, you know, it's like probably the most well, maybe not after Sith, but it's very operatic in the sense where people just speak their feelings, you know, from the
Yeah.
back row rather
Yeah,
than
very true.
showing it. And that's, you know, one of the big weaknesses. Like I was saying, the pacing is great, but it does sort of screech to a halt when you get to Anakin and Padme because I will, you know, admit the dialogue isn't great, but it's operatic because they're just expressing their feelings. And I think, you know, once it gets to that ending where Padme expresses her love, I think the real problem is she kisses him that one time, but you don't ever see her like smiling at him a lot in a sort of affectionate way.
They try to put all that affection and chemistry in the Naboo
yeah.
scene. It just doesn't work.
And a lot of times, and part of the problems with the prequels is the pacing, where it feels like you're dropped into the middle of a scene, which is what you want to do as a filmmaker, but it feels like you're dropped in the wrong part. Like that scene where she's in the dominatrix outfit and they just had dinner. You now cut. You go from them laughing at dinner to suddenly they're sitting on the couch, and it looks like we just came in after they had a really bad talk, and they've
So true.
decided to like turn away from each other and have a deep breath. I'm like, wait, what just happened? What was the scene before that? Like,
Yeah.
that could have helped with understanding more of like her feelings.
Well,
Got edited
you
out.
also have to consider her psychology after she had just gone through an assassination attempt by Count Dooku.
Which cost her one of her beloved handmaids.
Yes, and she didn't.
a whole tale
and
about
she
that
didn't even
handmaid.
really have time to process that before she had to go hiding back to her home planet. So
War, conflicting emotions
Yeah.
going on in there. Fair enough. Now we're talking about relationships. Well, let's talk about Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship in this movie.
so toxic.
It's 50% like friendship and 50% contentious.
Yeah.
It seems like, which
It's-
is not what you want out of somebody who's trying to teach you about life and shit like that.
yeah.
I actually kind of liked that angle because a lot of times we do have mentors in our lives or who we love and hate at the same time. So I did kind of like that angle. However, just like the rest of the film, it was so shoved down our throat and so just broadcasted so openly.
Yeah.
You know, like it wasn't, you didn't necessarily see actions necessarily where you could see where Anakin was frustrated with Obi-Wan and vice versa. It would literally be like a scene would open and Anakin would be like, I fucking hate your guts.
I wish the scene just opened with that. It's a hard open. I fucking hate you. It seemed like a good bit of the movie was less Obi-Wan encouraging and teaching and more Obi-Wan saying, hey, you fucked this up or don't go fuck this up.
Yeah, don't fuck this up, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not the way you teach. Maybe Obi-Wan just not a great teacher.
Hey, it goes back to what he
Probably
said.
because he just got fucking promoted.
It goes back to what he said in A New Hope, or Empire. He's like, I thought I could, or Jedi. He's like,
Yeah.
I thought I could teach him, as good as. He's like, no, I was wrong. It's like,
Yeah.
you weren't a good teacher.
Yeah, they
Got into it too young. I think they do a good job of showing that.
It's
in that sense.
what's really interesting is actually in the Clone Wars cartoon series, you see Anakin now with a Padawan, Ahsoka Tano.
Yes.
And he's way better with her than Obi-Wan was ever with
Some
Anakin.
people are just gifted teachers, man.
Well,
They know how to pass along information.
That's a good point though, because you have this gifted student, and these teachers. I remember, not to toot my own horn, but I was in some gifted programs in school, and the teacher didn't know what to do with me. I was bored out of my mind. So I mean, I didn't act out like Anakin, but if you have a student that much more advanced than most of the other students, and you're trying to hold them to this strict procedure, they're going to chafe against that, and they're going to buck and say, I don't want to do this. I already know how to do this. I just show your work. That's why I didn't get into algebra. Just show your work. I can't do that. It comes out of my head. I can't do that. And yeah, it's a gifted student and a mediocre teacher.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. There's 3 big action pieces in Attack of the Clones. You got your Obi-Wan and Anakin chasing the bounty hunter, right? You got Obi-Wan versus Django, and then the big joint at the end, man, the Jedi Royal Rumble. Which of those 3 are your favorites when it comes to the action pieces?
You want to take this one first?
Yeah, so this is probably my favorite third act in like any of the Star Wars. Once
it is
they
good. I like it a lot.
get to Geonosis and come out into the arena. And the reason is it starts with the intimate with the characters, grows into something epic, and then comes back around to the intimate action piece with the characters.
Yeah.
So you got them in the arena fighting off the monsters, the 3 main heroes. Then the clones and Jedi come in. It becomes bigger. Then the actual Clone War starts when they get rescued by those drop ships, which are fucking awesome. And then it's the Dooku chase, and then it starts boiling back down to just Anakin and Obi-Wan finishing their mission. And it's something like Kurosawa would do, Peter Jackson would do in Lord of the Rings, is you keep the characters in this sort of arena, but keep going back to their mission, which is sort of slightly separate. And so I love that it just keeps building and escalating into bigger, before going back around to, ultimately a failure and a loss at the end.
I will say that shot of them being, the silhouetted shot of them being carried out into the arena is one of my favorite shots in Star Wars. And also their, what did Williams Tyler theme? Love Across the Stars?
Across the Stars.
Yeah, that is a pretty fucking Williams. And I was rewatching for this podcast, man. He's trying his hardest to make this movie interesting, man. Williams broke his ankles off on this movie.
The interesting thing about that arena fight, it was actually going to be more gory, according to the action figures. They actually have a version of the Acklay, that 6-legged lizard mantis
Praying
creature.
mantis looking thing, yeah.
The toy actually has its guts come out of it.
Look, was that squeeze doll?
I thought they smelled bad on the outside.
Oh, stop.
Well, see, instead of Obi-Wan just cutting off his legs and just stabbing it through the back, he actually slit its abdomen open and its guts fell out, and then he killed it.
Oh, wow.
That's in the toy.
Good job, Lucas, for pulling back on that. So he did show restraint in this.
Yes, he did,
okay.
actually,
What do you
yes.
know?
So here's why I love that in battle so much. That is why I will sit through this movie to watch that in battle. One, because
DVDs have chapters, right?
listen,
Skip to the end.
you have to devote yourself to the whole film.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
The clones, I just love clones, man, and I love watching clones fighting. That clone battle was awesome. But another thing was, it changed the way we look at Jedi because they died in mass in that battle.
Right.
And we had never seen anything like that before. And if you go back to episode 1, Anakin makes a comment to Qui-Gon Jinn about how Jedi can't die. And he's like, oh, yeah, we can. And you've seen Jedi die before, but usually at the hands of a Dark Jedi or Sith, something like that. So they do seem kind of godlike and immortal. But in that battle, you see Jedi falling
Just blasters.
everywhere. I mean, I think they went from like... They rolled up in there with probably like 50 Jedi, and I think by the time they had them surrounded, there were like 5 or 6 left.
Yeah.
And that goes back to a ongoing theme in Star Wars of sacrifice. Which I'm always all about that, but that also shows us that these bigger than life characters have weaknesses. They can get hurt. So I really, really enjoyed that as a concept for who the Jedi really are.
Dopeness. A couple more Attack of the Clones questions here. Where does Dooku rank on your list of Sith?
He's a big fat Dooku.
Well, there you go. For me, he's at the very bottom of Sith we have seen on screen. What about you?
Well below Darth Sidious for me, but above Darth Maul.
Oh, you put him above Darth Maul?
Yeah, definitely. Because just not just because of Christopher Lee.
Does he have more screen time?
Well, he had more screen time, but he actually went back to his roots after he left the Jedi Order, and that was how he became a count. Because he was a part of a royal family that had been adopted by the Jedi. He had been taken from his family as a child and raised by the Jedi. But he went back to his roots. He took over all the holdings that his family had and basically started to run his portion of the galaxy.
Okay.
And so his disillusionment with the Jedi made him an easy mark for Darth Sidious.
Right.
And
turn him.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I said it when I was watching Attack of the Clones. I said it to myself that what Sidious did with Dooku is kind of what Snoke or Palpatine did with Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah, just found an easy mark and turned him.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah.
that.
He has a very interesting story, which comes out a lot in the books and in the comics and the extended universe. But you just don't get any of that in the films. You just get surface level
Yeah.
Dooku, but he's really an interesting character.
Yeah,
So
where do you put Dooku at?
that goes back to where I was had the brain fart, and I was like, this movie is the cartooniest and also the one of the fewest answers, and that's frustrating. And I feel like Dooku is a part of that. I think like I like him because he's Christopher Lee, but he's frustrating to me. Taking out the Clone Wars cartoon and the books and stuff, like just focusing on the movie, I can't get a handle on him. Like, is he really like is he playing Palpatine or Sidious in a way? Is he truly full on evil, or is he trying to figure out a way that he can use this to his own advantage and get rid of Sidious in like a noble sort of way? Like I can't figure, like when he admits like Darth Sidious is in charge to Obi-Wan, I'm like, yeah, he's confusing him, but at the same time, like, does he want Obi-Wan to maybe help him take him out? Like I can't get the handle.
Couldn't
on
get a
that.
read on
He was
him.
much
You know,
less Sith
yeah.
and more Dark Jedi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So he's better than Maul in that sense because you get a little bit more. But Maul's still cool. Just Maul floats on design.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. And a great lightsaber fight as
Yes,
well.
yeah.
If we were just gonna go with surface level characters and action stuff like that, they should have taken Dooku out and maybe done something else with him. Like if Disney had gotten a hold of him and done like a series about Dooku, that would have been fantastic. But if we're just doing surface level, replace him with someone who's a bit flashier to look at. Like we could have taken Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars and put that in there because her dynamic with Anakin is fucking incredible, and it would have been much more interesting to watch.
What I've always said about Dooku, I think they wasted Maul. He was too cool designed just to have as a one and done. I think Dooku should not have existed. I think Maul should have been that for lack of a better phrase, that James Bond henchman that harries Obi-Wan throughout the entire trilogy.
Yes.
Take out Dooku, take out Grievous. That should have been Maul the whole way through until they have that good fight scene at the end or whatever.
Well, there was also the matter of Lucas naming him Dooku because that's actually based on the Japanese doku, which means poison.
Oh,
So
okay.
he was there. Basically, if he had stayed with the Jedi, he would have poisoned them.
Yeah.
But going up to the Sith was actually closer to what he was really like on the inside because he always had a problem with being haughty in the Jedi Order according to the books and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, that's part of my issue with the movie is that they sort of they mention him in the movies, but he doesn't come into like pretty much the middle.
Yeah,
and so you don't like
the
get
second half of the second act.
Yeah, there's like that whole cutscene where they talk about he's one of the lost 20. Like I wish there was a little bit more of that. Not many Jedi have left the Order. This guy left the Order. I think that builds on his character more, but they don't put that in the movie necessarily.
That's another.
They really mauled his heart.
You can get out too.
I'll just see myself out.
That's another. It adds to my frustration of Attack of the Clones is there was a lot of. You had to dig through a lot of shit to get to some good ideas.
Yeah.
And if they'd have mined those good ideas, we could have had a far, far better film, I think.
there is the notion that some people say that if Rick McCallum wasn't there acting as producer and he had actually done more of an active role of reining in George Lucas's intentions and proclivities, that it would have been better.
Okay.
Because he didn't have people with him like George Lucas had with the original trilogy.
Right.
To sort of steer his ideas. Well, let's see if this works a little bit better. He
Yeah,
didn't
I
have.
think George was surrounded by a lot of yes men at that point.
Yeah. Rick McCallum was definitely sort of
Definitely
a
yes man.
Yeah.
All right, then let's touch them on again. The Jedi Council in this movie on Attack of the Clones. Had your thoughts changed on them as compared to Phantom Menace, or were they still just the same grouping of assholes that were doing things? To me, letting Obi-Wan train Anakin is a mistake on the Jedi Council at the end of the first one, and then letting Anakin escort the woman he's been creeping on hardcore, something Obi-Wan should have picked up on his first separate mission, I think was also a very bad decision.
The Jedi Council are arrogant, and it leads to dangerous ignorance.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they speak to that in the films. It's kind of in the background because they were pushing other agendas the whole time, but especially as you go into Revenge of the Sith and you start to see more of that theme, they were blind to everything.
Didn't Yoda say that? He's in that floating conversation.
He says
He's
it
like,
with Obi-Wan and Mace
Yeah.
Windu, and I'm like, how would you not
like,
realize you were also talking
yeah,
about
yeah.
yourselves?
Yeah.
That's psychological projection for you.
I think that's
Yeah.
part of Lucas's point is, the people who go down, they do it to themselves without realizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the part of the Jedi Code is a concern for all life, but the clones, an entire army of clones, are still
Didn't
living
count.
creatures.
Yeah.
I mean, even though they were cloned, but they were still living creatures. Each one, as Yoda explains in the Clone Wars cartoon, they're each different in the Force, so they are actually living things that they treated like droids. Why
They're
these,
treated like disposable.
Yeah. Why
uh,
these people who say that they care so much about life didn't care that much about the lives of these people just because they grew up in cylinders instead of out of the womb.
That was something that always really struck me very deep about the Clone Wars, not only Attack of the Clones, but the whole Clone Wars war itself, was that both sides were fighting with what they considered to be these kind of automatons, right?
Right.
And they weren't. These were people. The clones were people. They didn't want to die. They wanted to live, and they were genetically programmed to die after a certain amount of years anyway. And the droids don't want to get destroyed. It's not. They don't. They want to exist.
Yeah.
You know. And both sides are just pushing them into each other. It reminded me a lot of. I keep thinking back to World War I, where they're just guys on two sides of the trenches just getting flung at each other, and human life has decreased to a level where the bullet in your gun is worth more than the man who's firing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
So, Clones comes out, and boy, does it make some waves. But we piggyback, we ride that off with the 3 years later, 2005, Revenge of the Sith drops, which, pound for pound, I think might be one of the best openings of a Star Wars film.
totally.
The entire first act is... And thinking back, Lucas starts off. How many Star Wars was straight action? That, Star
A New
Wars,
Hope, yeah.
and I think that might be about it. There's still a little bit of lead up in Empire until the Battle of Hoth.
The Last Jedi starts with action.
Let's try. Okay, so
the
three
bomber-
movies.
the
I
bomber
thought we were
run.
just talking Lucas. Yeah.
Yeah. Three Star Wars movies of about to be 11. Start off with action, and this is easily the best one of those
Yeah,
three.
totally.
I think.
Absolutely.
Solid first ad. We introduced the General Grievous in live action form. What do we think about this lame ass dude? He's a big misstep for me.
Yeah, I can see that. He was much more malevolent in the Genndy Tartakovsky cartoon.
Yeah.
And they completely
yeah.
left out Dirge too from the Genndy Tartakovsky cartoon as well.
Dirge is so cool.
I would have loved to see Dirge fighting alongside with General Grievous. That would have made him much more of a threat to the Jedi, a personal threat to the Jedi, if he had been included in the movie as well.
All right. What do you think about Grievous there, Chris?
So for me, Grievous it's we talk about like maybe Maul should have been the bad guy in all three, but the real big bad, they're not doing the traditional. Lucas isn't doing the traditional hero and bad guy in this because it's about a hero becoming the bad guy, and so the ultimate bad guy is Sidious, of course, in the background. And Grievous is one more step in his pattern of using whatever he can to achieve whatever power he can get.
Yeah.
Just a
First
tool.
it's Maul, then it's Tyrannus, Dooku, now it's Grievous. So I don't have an issue with getting like a sort of like a new henchman in this, but it is again you're sort of thrust into not knowing a lot about the character, just like Dooku in the previous one, and now he's the sort of main bad guy. I like that he is sort of you can see an evolutionary step to getting to Vader, trying to make a sort of cyborg. He's got his brain, his eyes, his organs, and a robotic body.
Yes.
They're sort of laying that groundwork of like, okay, here's what's going to happen to Anakin at the end. He's going to be just a couple organs and his head, and then everything else is going to be mechanical. So thematically, he works as a villainous character. I think that's up for debate. He shows he's got a lightsaber collection, but we never see him kill one. I know that's in a cutscene. So I think that could have been something to add to him.
So once again, they have an opportunity to take a character that has a lot of depth and show what he is. Grievous is a force to be reckoned with. The Jedi are terrified of him, and he kills Jedi all the time. He wipes them out.
All of them.
Kill all the Jedi. He's a badass mofo. He really is. But again, what we end up with is these characters that have so much potential, and they get shoved into a 2.5 hour pocket, and there just wasn't enough time to work with him and really make him into what he could have been.
Right.
And Obi-Wan took him out way too easy. I mean,
way too easy. That's
General
not a great action scene.
General Grievous in one extended universe story took out like 8 Jedi by himself in a matter of minutes.
I guess they call him on a good day.
And how does he kill him with a blaster? And he's like, antiquated, and then that was it. Exactly.
I will say I did think that was pretty brutal, only because I have an issue with seeing like eyes explode on screen. Grievous's
that one does it to you.
So I was like,
Grievous could have done with a lot more of his Kalish background in his fight against the Hook on his home planet. He could have done with some of that, more exposition on that. But he was just sort of thrown in there, and you didn't know the story behind him, and you don't find it out without reading comic books.
Yeah, without further research.
Yeah.
you know, Obi-Wan did do a total video game move. He found his weakness, his one weak spot, and shot at it.
The one spot that was glowing, hit what's glowing.
Look, when you're dangling off the edge of something, you're hundreds of feet in the air, and there's a blaster at your hands. You got to do what you got to do to stay alive. And to that point, I saw somebody, I do believe it was in Paprika. Someone made the argument of, if you add the Clone Wars in it, it really fleshes out everything. And someone was like,
good.
Yeah, but if you need 44 hours of something to
make 1 hour better,
maybe that one thing that you're trying to flesh out isn't really all that
maybe you should
great.
reverse engineer this, Lucas.
So Palpatine's whole grand design is finally revealed in this film. This motherfucker plays a long game. What do you think about the Palpatine reveal? It's kind of anticlimactic to me. We knew what it was at the first second of episode 1. There's no real surprise there. But what
ultimate power?
When this whole thing is revealed, are you like, all right, well, that's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
But it shows what kind of power he had in the Force, though. That the Jedi had been so completely blinded to what kind of a threat he really posed to them.
Right.
Because he had this genteel, sophisticated politician face that he kept in front of them. But in the background, he was working on these machinations, pulling strings and stuff like that all over the galaxy, and the Jedi were completely oblivious to it.
Yeah, I think the only way this works is if you show somebody who doesn't know in chronological order.
Yeah. Did you notice that Emperor Palpatine's face got better from Revenge of the Sith to Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, though he had the butt face going on.
Yeah, it looks like he got a little tuck or something.
Yeah,
got the Sith tuck.
Little nip tuck there. Oh, a little Sith tuck
Sith
there.
tuck,
I
a
see
little
you doing
Sith
that. I see you doing that.
These are the jokes, folks.
What else we got?
When I first saw The Phantom Menace at 16, however old I was, 17, I totally did not think Sidious was Palpatine.
Oh, really?
I thought in these prequels we were going to see Sidious turn Palpatine and Palpatine would become the Emperor. Like, I didn't think Palpatine would have had a Darth name.
Yeah.
Eventually on the internet reading message boards, I was like, oh shit, I guess that is the same guy, So I do think there's potential where someone might not realize it. And as far as his, reveal in this, it's a big case of dramatic irony. And so the audience knows something the characters don't. And what you're excited to see is how the characters are going to react to that revelation.
Yeah, it's the big reveal.
And so for me, the interesting thing is that Palpatine feels so confident now at this point that he's just going to flat out, admit it to Anakin because he feels that he's got his hooks in him, enough. Like even he tells Grievous in the beginning, like, hey, sorry about death of Dooku. And he's like, yeah, it was necessary because I got another apprentice coming up. He's like, I've got everything in place now. For 20 years I've been working this angle. I had all these other henchmen and just been waiting. This is like my trump card here.
He was flexing. He was straight up flexing.
He flexes hard. And like when he's cackling with Yoda during the whole fight. At first I was like, what is this senile old man? But you think about it, for the last 20 years, he's had to put on this face.
Right.
And these people who he just fucking hates, he's had to work with and deal with. It's like like a Jewish person having to infiltrate the Nazis.
Right.
Just working his whole plan. He's like, I'm going to shoot every one of these
whole last
motherfuckers in the
section,
face.
That whole last bit of the movie is just him depositing check after check at Wells Fargo.
Yeah, he's like, I can finally break free and just
Right.
be who I am in
Right,
public.
and
Yeah.
some would
it's
say-
liberating in a way.
Some would say that his scars and disfiguration, that's actually his real face.
Yeah.
It's finally revealed.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That's the monster within, the real Sith.
All
Well,
right.
I mean, there was the Force lightning being forced back into his face too.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
little bit of that. A little bit of that.
metaphorical face.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it, man. The Jedi Council in this joint, man. There's a point in this movie where Yoda pretty much tells Anakin, "Oh, there's somebody you care about. Fuck them. Let them die."
Yeah, pretty much.
And I was like, "Jeez, these people are just so blind and tone deaf to what's going on." What do you think of the Jedi Council in this film?
They were still trying to hold to their old code that do not grieve for them because they'll live on in the Force anyway. So it's nice. It's probably not best to form an attachment to them because they're all going to die. But you have to realize that Yoda was 900 years old at this point, so he'd seen generations of people come and go.
Right,
So
right.
that would be his advice because you're going to get past it eventually because that's what he had to do. He
Yeah.
literally had to do that. See, all of his apprentices and stuff like that die over centuries.
Yeah. I like his message of, don't mourn the death, celebrate the life, is pretty
Yes.
much what they say. But telling that to somebody who they're like, I care about this person, and it's like, that's a bad move. Tactically, I think it was bad tact on his part with that bit of advice. So what do y'all think about the Jedi Council in this damn flick?
It goes back to them, following the rules, and also, Yoda doesn't necessarily know what's going on in Anakin's head, other than what Anakin just told him. So it's like, again, dramatic irony in which Yoda doesn't know all the secrets that Anakin has.
Right.
And Anakin is so desperate to he wants to impress the Jedi. He's wanted to be a part of them. He wants to do good basically for the Jedi, and whenever he's told these things, it's hard.
Yeah.
But the Jedi don't necessarily know what's going on in Anakin's head, and so it's like a priest trying to tell anyone else, like, like you said, celebrate the life. They're going to join the Force. That's something we should be like really super happy for.
Yeah.
But they don't know the attachments he has, and so they're right in the sense you shouldn't have attachments because you can't.
Because look what happens.
Right. It's the same. People argue that with priests, like, well, maybe you shouldn't make them celibate because then they end up turning to the dark side.
You got to bust that nut every once in a while.
I was disappointed but not surprised.
Yeah.
And I'd always talked shit about Jedi, and people were like, but they're the good guys, and I'd be like, are they?
Are they really,
The thing
though?
was, they were losing the Clone Wars. They were losing it, and they knew it, and they just stuck their heads in the sand. And they're like, no attachment. If I die, I die. Well, okay, sure, but we need you. You need to be aware of yourself as a person, at least to the extent that you can be useful to the rest of the Jedi and the rest of the world. You can't just stand back with your hands off and say everyone's going to die someday. You're losing the war.
Yeah.
And I just felt like they had given up, but they were such pompous assholes that they didn't want the world to see their weaknesses, even though they are the same people who champion the fact that you should not seek power.
Yes.
They didn't want to show that they were losing theirs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can
But,
get down with that.
it's a religion, and religions are very hard to change.
Yeah.
And so they've had their rules for thousands of years, and it's always worked. And if they had stuck to it from the beginning, and like saying, well, our rule says we shouldn't,
Train this kid.
Anakin,
because they had
wouldn't have
predated
that
the old
problem.
Republic.
Yeah.
So it's a comment on religion, and religion just is very difficult to change. No one's going to ever admit they're wrong until way down the line.
Yes.
Way
Yeah,
down.
until it's way, way, way too late.
Right.
We got time for maybe one or two more questions left. Let's talk about Anakin's turn real quick. Was it too quick? Was it too slow? Did Lucas pace that out well?
I think he paced it fairly well. I think, considering the amount of what time he had and his poor time management on other things in the films, I think he did okay with Anakin. I think he turned at an appropriate time. But man, he went balls to the wall so fast, though.
Yeah.
Like,
You mean like after the turn?
yeah, like after the turn, he was like, well, time to literally murder every single thing.
Yeah.
And he went there very quickly.
Yes.
Where I feel like right after you turn, there would have been an incubation period where Sidious would have been like, okay, kill these younglings.
Some small shit
Yeah,
first.
kill these younglings, then be traumatized about it for a couple of days, and then I need you to go over here and kill these people. But he wiped clean slate right away.
Yeah, but that was his initiation into being a full bore Sith.
Right,
that's true,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Palpatine straight up tells him, like, only by doing this can you be strong enough with the dark side. And at this point, Anakin's not necessarily thinking he's evil. He's just thinking, I need to use the dark side that the Jedi have been suppressing from me all this time. And so, again, going back to, like, Anakin just wants to be a part of the Jedi and wants to impress him so much, and he keeps getting shut down and told no over and over again in this movie. Hey, you're on the Jedi Council, but you're not a master.
Yes.
And he's like, well, damn it, okay, and then it's Palpatine's putting all these things in his head, like, hey, the Jedi are, they're not who you think they are. They're not the good heroes you've always believed in. They do bad things. They're political. They don't want to lose their power. And so then when Mace Windu comes in and is threatening to basically execute Palpatine,
without a
Anakin is
trial.
still trying to, play by the rules, and he's like, no, this is wrong, and you see that meme where Mace is like, well, how about you just let me do this one thing? I'll let you have your wife and stuff. But, in Anakin's kind of right. Like, Mace Windu is breaking the law here, which is what Palpatine told him was going to happen.
And with that value system that they were installing in him this whole way through, I mean, they're literally the Jedi Order's kind of saying to Anakin, the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yeah.
It's never going to get better for him.
Right.
It's only going to get, if anything, it could get worse.
Right.
And he's been suffering under these rules for so long.
And now he's going to watch Mace break a rule.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he was so desperate though to do anything to keep Padme alive. But it's interesting. He was almost like Palpatine became like his North Star, like Fisk became the North Star to Bullseye.
Yeah.
In that last season of Daredevil.
Nice fist of the North Star reference there. I dig it. Wasn't expecting that today.
All right.
One more question left to wrap this on up. So we get Padme's death, Yoda's self-imposed exile, the splitting of the twins. This movie wraps up fairly neatly, I would say, pretty succinctly. Do you remember your thoughts leaving this, what we thought could possibly be the final star? Were you satisfied as a whole with this trilogy, Sherman?
I was, because you could see that Uncle Owen had seen all the stuff that his stepbrother had gone off into the galaxy and done, and he didn't want his son, that had just basically been dropped in his lap, to go that way. So you can see where he would be hard on him and not tell him to go waste time with his friends in Tashi Station and stuff like
Also,
that.
by the way, Tashi Station equals strip club. Power converters equals whores. I will believe that till the day I die.
No wonder he was whining so much.
Exactly.
And he was really farming that moisture.
So you're cool with how it all wraps up.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah.
All right, then, Josh, what were your thoughts when leaving
I was
Revenge of the
happy
Sith?
with it. I mean, but I'm pretty easy when it comes to Star Wars, so I was happy with it. I liked Episode 1. Episode 2 had some things that I enjoyed. Episode 3 was an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
I left there a little bit teary-eyed.
Three bumps up from PG to PG-13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that last fight where Obi-Wan is like, you were the chosen one. You were supposed to bring balance and peace to the galaxy, not leave it in ruin.
That is the best writing in that trilogy.
Yeah, I get goosebumps when they're having that conversation. I feel like it really.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, and it wrapped up those 3 films, and it gave me what I needed to get closure. So
All right.
I liked it.
Mike, Chris, when leaving the theaters, watching Episode 3 for the first time, man, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I was very happy with it. I'm still, a little let down, not let down by the quality, but like let down emotionally by that scene you just mentioned. Yeah. And I think Lucas did a really good thing by pacing those final scenes into like really no dialogue and imagery and music and letting
A little
the
juxtaposition
emotion
there.
sort of take us out and carry us through. So you get the the birth of Vader and the birth of the twins mirroring each other, and you get the funeral for Padme, where we finally get to see that necklace Anakin made for her in the Phantom Menace, which I really wish he would have brought into Attack of the Clones as part of their courtship.
Right.
And then ending with the twin sons with a little bit of hope. I thought that was a very, very good way to wrap up that prequel trilogy and bridge it to the original trilogy.
And that wraps this bit of business up. Thank you, Sherman. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Chris, for coming on and talking now a little bit about the prequel trilogy. In the next episode, we'll be talking about the old school Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi. So come on back for that. Until then, you guys take it easy and have a good one.
May the Force be with you.